Hello and welcome to the Scatterbolt channel, and today we're going to be ranking every single graphics card you can buy brand new in 2024. And I mean, seriously, look at this. This isn't even all the boxes we're going to cover today. There's still more. So just like my CPUs tier list video, which you should definitely watch, I figured I'd go ahead and do something similar for graphics cards because equally, there are a ton of different graphics card options out there from AMD, Nvidia, and Intel. And I bet if you're wanting to choose what's the best graphics card for your PC for a certain budget, there may be so many options out there that you might feel overwhelmed with picking the right one. So in this tier list video, I've broken down everything as simple as possible and ranked all of these graphics cards from S tier all the way to Garbo tier to help you best choose your next graphics card for a PC build or for choosing a pre-built with one of these graphics cards. And I want to stress, this is just covering brand new graphics cards you can buy right now. So there are some RTX 3000 and RX 6000 cards that are not going to be covered in this tier list because they aren't being made brand new anymore. And that goes for anything older than those generations as well. This is only covering stuff you can buy right now on Amazon, Newegg, or whatever e-tailer you choose, which by the way, all of these graphics cards you see me mention throughout this video, and I would recommend you only check out the good ones, are going to be all linked in the description below if you want to check any of these out, and if you want to find the right kind of PC build to pair up with one of these graphics cards, check out pcbuilds.gg. That is a very helpful resource showing you the best possible PCs you can build for different budgets with, again, some of the best graphics cards you'll see throughout this tier list video. So with all that said, we're gonna rank the drivers for all three brands first and then get into the graphics cards. Okay, we definitely have to dispel some myths before we get into the actual GPU tier list, because I know this is going to appear a lot in the comments section. So let's take care of this first. Let's go ahead and rank where the drivers are at right now for these different graphics card brands in 2024. And I've added some help with this and including some older versions of their drivers that a lot of people may reference to when you hear certain things like AMD graphics card drivers are bad, Intel ARC graphics card drivers are bad. Let me go ahead and dispel some myths for you. So the first thing I want to cover are AMD Radeon graphics drivers pre-2020. So pretty much anything before RX 5000 and up to RX 5000 as well. The first graphics card I ever owned was a Radeon 7770 gigahertz edition from 2013. That graphics card I don't think gave me too many issues. Then my next Radeon graphics card was an RX Vega 56. That also didn't necessarily give me any issues, but I got my first taste of AMD graphics card drivers and the negative stigma you hear around it with my first RDNA graphics card, the RX 5700 reference edition graphics card. I do recall quite a few times that graphics card did crash during heavy gaming. And this is probably where you hear the negative stigma of, oh, AMD graphics cards, they're not stable, their drivers are bad. If I load up a certain game, I get automatic stuttering and all this very terrible stuff that doesn't necessarily make you want to get an AMD graphics card in the first place. But here's the deal. That bad negative experience that I had with the Radeon graphics card was with an RX 5700. That was the first iteration of AMD's new RDNA architecture. And where are we right now in 2024? AMD is soon going to release new RDNA 4 graphics cards. Fourth revision. They've done this 4 times, more or less. And it would make sense that a brand new architecture from AMD is buggy and unstable at launch with their new RX 5000 graphics cards, like what I had with my RX 5700. And I can definitely attest to that because I saw also equally a lot of driver horror stories for the RX 5700 XT and RX 5600 XT when those graphics cards first came out in late 2019, early 2020. But now 4 years on, AMD have really ironed out their issues, and we'll talk more on that later, but to rightfully put where their pre-2020 drivers are, because this is probably where you hear a lot of the negative stigma again around AMD drivers and all of that. I will put this where it rightfully belongs, right smack dab in B tier. In all honesty, I don't think they were that bad. I think a lot of people who previously owned an AMD graphics card would say they weren't bad. bad. There just happened to be a game here and there that ran poorly or wasn't too optimized, but I assume after a while, AMD got on top of it. But their driver support team then is not nearly as good as it is now. Like 2021 up until now, I pretty much don't recall any driver horror stories from AMD to a severe degree from the media and from tech influencers from RX 6000 onwards. That was their RDNA 2 graphics cards, which would make sense. That is their second iteration of the RDNA architecture. They probably ironed out a lot of issues from the first generation, so the second generation is more refined. And to my knowledge, and to a lot of other people's knowledge, the drivers for RX 6000 and RX 7000 are a lot better than what they were previously. And if you do come across any horror story of AMD graphics card drivers being bad on any of their new graphics cards, honestly, let's take a step back and let's look at the current state of PC gaming in 2024. This also happens to Nvidia, but there have been multiple instances lately where brand new PC games drop on launch day and they're absolutely unoptimized, they're buggy messes, they're stuttering, just a lot of just ridiculous stuff that PC gamers shouldn't have to put up with in the first place. And whenever you come across one of those launch day experiences, I feel a lot of people go straight to blaming the graphics card instead of blaming the game and the developers who were rushed to optimize that game for PC in the first place. There's only so much that AMD, Intel, and even Nvidia can do to optimize for those launch day drivers for certain games, as we've seen multiple times in the past from numerous launches on PC. It's just a thing nowadays. Now, admittedly, those issues get ironed out, say, 1 to 2 months after the launch of a new PC game. But if you do experience any issues with a brand new PC game at launch, blame the game, don't blame the graphics card. But I can safely say right now that AMD drivers in 2021 to 2024 and beyond should be really well as long as we stay on the RDNA architecture. So they are getting an S tier. And again, I can personally vouch from all the PCs I've built recently, only one of them with an RX 7000 graphics card gave me a little bit of a hiccup. And that was an RX 7700 XT within launch, with a brand new $1,200 PC build that released last year in September. That card gave me an issue on one game, but note that card was out for a month when I made that PC build guide. I just made another PC build guide with the RX 7700 XT recently for my $1,000 build, and that card gave me 0 issues. They're really good drivers, guys. Let's be real. Just like Nvidia, we gotta also put these guys at the top of S tier because Nvidia is a software company first and a hardware company second. But that doesn't mean they don't make bad graphics cards. But their software, as we've seen from ray tracing, DLSS, AI frame generation, they are the kings at that, in which that would explain why they're really good at drivers, because they're a software company first. And there's really not much more I gotta say other than even Nvidia drivers aren't perfect. Recently, there was a CS2 tournament where the preferred graphics card of choice was the RTX 4080, and the preferred graphics card of choice happened to crash in a few instances when gaming in the tournament. So even Nvidia cards aren't susceptible to crashes here and there. But once again, if you do run into any issues with even an Nvidia graphics card, there maybe was a step that you missed over when you were first building your PC with one of those graphics cards, or again, launch day drivers for a lot of recent PC games are just really bad because the games themselves are just poorly optimized from developers in the first place. Okay, but this is interesting. I wanted to separate Intel Arc from launch and where it is now. So at launch, Intel Arc was legitimately like the really bad AMD driver stuff that you see people peddle around in the PC space, but for real. Like if you actually saw the performance of these Arc graphics cards on launch, they looked very foreboding. They did not look positive at all for the outlook for what Intel Arc would maybe turn into, which fortunately never happened because the drivers for these got substantially better. But at launch, they were actually abysmal, and I need to add a new row for this because that is how bad they were. If you want an example of bad graphics card drivers, look at Intel Arc when it first dropped. That is going to be your best example of really bad graphics card drivers. And there you have it. But now what about in 2024 up until now? Well, they've gotten a lot better, but they still aren't perfect. For instance, Starfield is still terribly optimized for Intel Arc. Grand Theft Auto 5 is giving Arc graphics cards a little bit of a hiccup, but inversely, there are some games on Intel Arc that definitely punch way above their category and price bracket in terms of optimization and beat graphics cards that cost way more than it. So it's very much like very good or pretty bad, but most of the time it's okay. Also, not to mention though, if you're the person who's like, I want to boot up a game from my childhood from like 1997 and I want to run it on an Intel Arc graphics card, good luck. Because Intel Arc is pretty much mostly optimized for DirectX 12, DirectX 11 here and there, and a few select DirectX 9 titles like CS2 or CSGO, Team Fortress 2, those old, really popular games that ran on DX9. But anything that wasn't popular and ran on DX9, like I said, good luck. So there are limitations, so I will put this where it belongs in C tier. They've definitely gotten better. Performance has drastically gotten for the better with these ARC graphics cards, but they still got a little bit of a ways to go. Man, and with that, let's finally get into the GPU tier list. And with that done, we can finally get started on ranking the graphics cards, which we're gonna start with some of the cheapest graphics cards and work our way up to the most expensive. But I wanna quickly say a quick thanks to those of you who provided some awesome reception to the last tier list video. I want to hopefully recreate that same sort of fun, informative sort of content for this video. So I'd say like this video if you want to see a tier list video for budget PC cases. That'll let me know if I should do the effort of categorizing all the budget PC cases out there into another tier list like this. But to get started, let's go ahead and check out our first graphics card here, any RX 500 Aliexpress GPU. Now, the reason why I kind of wanted to break the rules and include this kind of graphics card into the tier list, or more or less multiple graphics cards, it could be either the RX 580 or RX 550 from Aliexpress. Those are the two most popular models that I see from there because I know I'm going to be asked about it in the comment section, even though you technically can't really get these from Amazon. Actually, you kind of can, but they're really overpriced. But someone on Twitter actually made a really good point as to why these really cheap $50 RX 580s from AliExpress may make sense, even though they're no longer technically supported driver-wise from AMD. And that's because they're stupid cheap and they're brand new. You can get a brand new RX 580 from AliExpress for 50 bucks. That's actually really good. So these really cheap RX 500 series GPUs from AliExpress, I don't necessarily recommend for long-term use, but if you need something cheap that can display out, there you have it. That's the only reason you want to consider them, but I'm not sugarcoating it. These are slow AF because they were released like 8 years ago. Now onto our first actual graphics card of the video, the Intel ARC A380. This is the cheapest brand new graphics card you can get right now from Intel that costs about $100. You can also get this in a low profile format. This comes with 6 gigabytes of VRAM, which in my opinion is its really only main notable feature, other than it's also the cheapest graphics card that features the AV1 codec if you wanted to take advantage of any sort of advanced streaming or game recording with a graphics card that maybe doesn't have AV1 on your rig, but you can plop this in and then all of a sudden you can use AV1. So for that reason, it's a bit utilitarian, but as far as gaming performance goes, it's very meh. And where do meh graphics cards go in our tier list? E tier. If you spent like at least $50 more than an ARC A380, you would get a substantially better graphics card for gaming that provide a much bigger uplift in performance. I know this is really cheap, but that really is the only thing going for it other than being more of a useful graphics card for things other than gaming than actually gaming. And I do need to throw in the RX 580 8GB, like a standard one you can get from X2X, because still somehow this graphics card is selling a lot on Amazon. People are still picking them up. You shouldn't. It costs 120 bucks. I don't care how cheap that is. AMD is no longer supporting RX 500 series graphics cards from the Polaris era. They are done. If you want to run GTA 6 on this, good freaking luck. It's not going to support it. So I'm going to put it in Garbo tier because for $120, there are way newer and way better graphics cards, and somehow they're still selling on Amazon. So this is your big PSA to avoid these altogether. Oh, the pain actually doesn't stop. Man, AMD had some really bad stinkers with RX 6000 below $200. It was a different time in PC gaming back then because we were going through the cryptocurrency boom and the chip shortage, and no PC gamers could realistically get their hands on a graphics card for an affordable price. So AMD was like, okay, let's basically bring out a laptop GPU, put it in a desktop format, and sell it for a marked up price. And one of those was the RX 6400. This has 4 gigabytes of VRAM. Oh yeah, and if you had a processor that only supported PCI Gen 3.0, you're screwed. Because the lanes on this graphics card are so small, it'll actually reduce the speed of this graphics card. So you really could only make the most out of this graphics card with a CPU that supported PCI Gen 4.0 and above, which wasn't that much of an issue nowadays, or it's not really. But back then in early 2022, when this card came out, it was, because some of AMD and Intel's cheapest processors didn't support PCI Gen 4.0 at the time. Only the Intel i3-12100 did. Anyways, this is a lot of exposition. This graphics card is really freaking slow. Avoid it. Yeah, we're gonna put this in Garbo tier above the... Wait, I think an RX 580 is faster than a 6400, right? It might be. Yeah, it might be. Oh my, this card's... This isn't the same formula, but also kind of painful. The 6500 XT was AMD's answer, their Hail Mary to give graphics cards to gamers who otherwise couldn't get any of their other graphics cards, because this, I don't think, would have been that good for mining at the time, but you really needed a specific kind of system to make the most of it. And my 2022 $700 gaming PC build was probably the only one that could really effectively utilize this graphics card back in the day, which made it okay. But again, this has 4 gigabytes of VRAM. That is absolutely inexcusable in 2024. You need a CPU that supports PCI Gen 4.0 to make the most of this kind of graphics card, which you wouldn't really find that issue in any of these other graphics cards. And also now in 2024, the lack of VRAM really hurts this graphics card. It's really slow. Oh yeah, and just like the 6400, did I mention that the memory bus bandwidth on this, not the bandwidth, the bus width I think is 96 bits? That is abysmally small. That is, that's like, we're putting this. The fact that these are technically still being sold brand new is a crime. And by that definition, I have to include them in the tier list. Just like the RX 6500 XT 8GB. Did you guys remember this card? I totally forgot it was a thing. So this is like what the 6500 XT should have been at launch, but it still retains the same really small 96-bit memory bus, but it's 8GB of VRAM for not that much more. So by definition, it's slightly better, but it still freaking sucks. F tier, ugh. It has just been straight pain so far this tier list. But finally, we come to a more respectable graphics card, the Intel ARC A580. There is no other graphics card like this below $200. The amount of hardware and performance you get in this kind of a graphics card for below $200 is really superb. The RTX 3050 6GB can't match this. Even thanks to recent driver updates, this is now basically as fast as an RX 6600, which is actually quite the achievement, because the Intel ARC A750 was on par with the 6600, but now it's faster than it. And this is caught up to a 6600. So once again, bravo to the Intel driver development team. But still, that doesn't gloss over the fact that there's quite a few games on here that don't run particularly well. But for the games that do run well on this graphics card, it absolutely smashes. It's like a glass cannon if I had to describe this graphics card. But again, like, there's only a few games that run really poorly on ARC graphics cards right now, so I would just go ahead and do that research beforehand if you're considering picking up one of these ARC graphics cards. But in a nutshell, if you plan to run anything on DirectX 12 or newer, you're gonna be fine. And the performance you'll get out of these ARC graphics cards, on top of the fact that they support AV1 and Intel QuickSync, so they're also a really good budget pick for video editors, make this, surprisingly, a really well-rounded graphics card for below $200. Oh yeah, and did I mention the memory bus width on this is not 128 bits. It's 256 bits. That's the most of any graphics card below 200 bucks. It's a good graphics card, guys. I'm letting you know, I tried it. It's really good. It's going up to A tier, deservingly so. Man, back when I first started YouTube, budget graphics cards like below $200 used to be really good. Now, as you can see so far from the tier list, all of them nearly suck, including the RTX 3050. Now, Toasty Bros, I know you replied to my tweet that you have a soft spot for this graphics card because the low profile edition of this graphics card can run without, I believe, a PCIe power connector, which makes it a really awesome pick to throw into like an old computer, especially one of those small form factor ones that have like the shortened PCI cover slot, ones that you can't necessarily fit a full-size graphics card into. I know this is really useful for those scenarios, but that's a very small subset of PC gamers. For the majority of people who are like, oh, it's an Nvidia graphics card below $200, that means it's really good. No, it's not. This isn't even a 3050, it's like an RTX 3040, because not only does it get a memory reduction from 8 to 6, but the actual architecture of this graphics card is less. You don't get the same amount of CUDA cores in this graphics card as you do the original 3050 with 8 gigabytes. And as a result, its performance is on par with a 5-year-old GTX 1660 Super. But this can do ray tracing. Oh my goodness, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. No, it's not. It sucks. It's going top of F tier. Yeah, not a good card. What is a great card though? ARC A750. Now, this basically is the A580, but with a little bit extra juice. But it does cost about $40 to $30 more depending on the model. Now, this graphics card only really shines when it's on discount, because the ARC A580 is constantly being sold for about $160 at the lowest, and that's been consistent for the last few months. Whereas this card fluctuates in price. It's either at $200, which is okay, or sometimes it goes on a discount for $180, and then it actually is a really good deal. And I think during Black Friday, the lowest this card got to was like $170 or maybe even $165. That's really aggressive for this kind of card. But something I should mention with a lot of these ARC graphics cards, especially as we go higher up in the tiers for the A750 and eventually the A770, these things do consume a lot of power. And to my knowledge in the Intel ARC software, because I even looked into this as well, it's a little bit tricky to undervolt these graphics cards within the ARC software itself, which it should really support because these consume a lot of power, and that will kind of affect the ranking of the A750. But the actual performance, and again, all the features and the well-roundedness of this card, and the fact that in a few select games, this thing really kicks ass, does make it a good performing graphics card for its price, and even better when it's on a discount. So I'm gonna put this in B tier, but do keep in mind, if there's any other graphics card that goes into B tier, it's gonna go above the A750 simply for power efficiency reasons. Oh, we can move to the next stack. Oh, praise. This is not worth praising though. The RTX 3050. This was the first really big stinker from RTX 3000. Wait, I lied, actually there's another one. But yeah, 3050, for the longest time, it was severely overpriced. Back during the crypto mining boom and the GPU die shortage, this card was retailing for about $350, which was absolutely a scam. And even now, when it has gone down in price quite a bit, and you can still technically find these brand new on Amazon, it's $190, and that's not enough. This thing gets beat by an ARC A750, which we just covered, and an RX 6600. No amount of DLSS can save this graphics card whatsoever. It's just really underpowered. With these lower SKUs from Nvidia, recently from RTX 4000 and RTX 3000, they're really skimping on the hardware you can get the lower down you go. And it's almost like they incentivize you to spend way more than what you're comfortable just to get a more respectable and well-rounded graphics card hardware-wise. And yes, I get it, I know Nvidia is a software company, a lot of the software like DLSS makes up for these cards, but the fact that this card doesn't even support frame generation in the first place just makes it an absolute stinker. It's not good for its price. That said, even though it's faster than the RTX 3050 6GB, I'm gonna put it below it, because at least the 3050 has that really neat low profile variant that is very useful, again, for that small subset of PC gamers that's gonna take like their grandma's computer and throw a 3050 6GB into it. The 3058 can't even be useful at all. It's got no use. But at least it won't be gimped like an RX 6500 XT. Now the RX 6600, finally, a more respectable graphics card. This at one point last year was the best budget graphics card you could buy, period. However, it's gone up in price a little bit. I think AMD is soon going to discontinue it in favor of the RX 7600, but it's still being sold for $200 brand new. And even though the Intel ARC A750 is a faster graphics card, this does consume a lot less power. Inversely though, the memory on this graphics card isn't as impressive as the A750 because this has a 128-bit memory bus. The A750 has the larger 256-bit memory bus. And in a few select games, the A750 will absolutely glass cannon this RX 6600. But also there's a few games where the RX 6600, like in Starfield, is just optimized way better and will cream over that A750. Still though, I'm gonna have to give the nod to the RX 6600, but pricing wise, I don't think it's as attractive as before. And again, the A750 I think is the slightly stronger pick for a graphics card, but it's not a bad card by any means. So although I just said any graphics card I put in B tier will be above the A750, I think this is a good card to pick below it, just because the A750 has simply gotten faster over time, whereas the RX 6600 hasn't, and the A750 has been going down in price over time, and this is slightly going up in price. That could change come Cyber Monday and Black Friday and Amazon Prime Day, but right now, I don't think so. Still a really good card though. 6650 XT for about, right now, $220. Yes, 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 yes. Like I just said, the RX 6600 at 200 bucks, not necessarily the best deal, but this for $20 more, abso-freaking-lutely. Even if this was $30 more, I would still pick this up. For an extra 40 bucks, yeah, I still would. The 6650 XT, I think, is a really good choice because this more or less has about the same performance as an RX 7600, this card right here. But there's a $20 difference in price right now, or at most $30. So really, you're paying an extra $30 for the 7600 to support the AV1 codec and be slightly more efficient. And I like to think if you've already made your choice on getting an AMD graphics card in this price range, you might as well save your money and get a 6650 XT and spend the extra $20 or $30 you save on something else for your budget gaming PC where every dollar matters. This is a 1080p gaming workhorse. I really like it. It definitely puts some daylight between this and the A750 for sure. This is going to get an A tier in our tier list right here. This is a really well-rounded graphics card for a very attractive price, but get it while you can because it probably might not stay in stock for any longer. Okay, next up we have the RX 6600 XT. Although this technically no longer exists because AMD isn't really producing these anymore, you can still technically buy them on Amazon and Newegg, so therefore it meets the requirements to be in this tier list. And this is actually running a little bit more expensive than the very excellent 6650 XT, so you kind of already know where it's going to end up. That said, it's very similar to this card, so it's going to get still a good ranking, just not as good as the 6650 XT. Still a great 1080p gaming graphics card though, and I think if you can get one of these used actually, that might actually be an even better deal than getting one of these brand new. Well, it is going to be a better deal, but like way better, because the 6600 XT was replaced by the 6650 XT. So there's going to be a lot more used 6600 XTs out there. So on the used market, this is going to be super hot, but brand new, nah. We're going to throw this in C tier. We can open this one up. I'll show you. RX 7600. All right, this one, I liked it when it first launched, but now I don't necessarily like it a whole lot anymore because it didn't really improve much upon the 6650 XT it was meant to replace. In terms of performance, it's really close, and unless this graphics card is on a discount, I personally wouldn't really consider getting this for like $260 or $270. I'd only really consider this if you can get this for a good discount below $260. Because like I said, the 6650 XT is just a straight up better buy in terms of a Radeon graphics card. And the only advantages you get on this card over that 6650 XT is the AV1 codec, which is cool if you do content creation or any sort of streaming, and this does consume a little bit less power over time. But hardware-wise from AMD, this just isn't their best showing really. It's got a 128-bit memory bus, which is kind of pathetic for its price, and again, 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And they did address that VRAM shortage in another graphics card we'll cover soon, but for this tier list, we're gonna give it a meh C tier ranking above the 6600 XT. Oh, this one. Okay, so Nvidia released an 8GB version of the 3060, but it's not a 3060. Really? This is an RTX 3050 Ti 8GB. Because kind of like the difference between the 6GB 3050 and the 8GB 3050, not only was there a size in memory between the 8GB and the 12GB 3060, and what's absolutely disturbing about the RTX 3060 8GB is that it's selling for $270 $30 brand new. So not only is that within $15 of the RTX 3060, at least here in the States, but it's within $30 of the RTX 4060 and the 6700 XT and the 7600 XT, more or less. So why is there like an RTX 3050 Ti 8GB for $270? It doesn't make sense. I feel like Nvidia was like, the 3060 12GB is our best selling graphics card. We can get away with making an 8GB 3060, but keeping the 3060 label, even though it's a more gimped graphics card. It's a very bad move by Nvidia to put this out. Fortunately, they didn't really market it a whole lot, so that's cool, and tech reviewers immediately recognized this graphics card for what it is. I think it's slower than an A580, straight up. I think it is actually, because it's a fair amount slower than the A750. It's a crime against humanity. I gotta put it there, guys. It's a piece of crap. It's not good, man. Now, what is kind of good, depending on the right person, is the Intel ARC A770. You can pick up one of these right now from Amazon US for $270. That's not terrible, because this graphics card launched for about $340 all the way back in 2022, but I've seen how cheap this graphics card can go. During Black Friday last year, you could have picked up one of these for $250, and that was a steal for the time. But now in 2024, with other graphics cards like the RX 6700 XT coming down in price a lot, within $30 of this, or actually $20, as well as the 7600 XT now being a thing, the A770 isn't as strong of a value proposition as it was 1 year ago, and it just needs to undergo even more price discounts to be appealing to PC gamers. Because if you look at benchmarks between the A770 and the A750, although this comes with double the VRAM, it isn't necessarily faster, because the core of the A770 is so similar to the A750. If you come across a game that doesn't max out its VRAM, it's still gonna be kind of a slow graphics card, and in some instances, it even gets beat by like an RTX 3060, which is kind of embarrassing. But then again, being a glass cannon, there's some instances where the A770 is absolutely locked in and destroys everything else in its category. You know, that doesn't happen all the time. I wish it could for every single game if the Intel driver team could truly step it up, but even this card has its limitations. That 16GB VRAM buffer should hopefully not fool you, because at the end of the day, I don't think it's that great of a proposition for gaming. For video editing, I think it's really good, but for gaming, nah. This is going to be our first D tier graphics card of the tier list. This is the, oh, guys, I'm trying to be impartial here, but I hate this graphics card. You know why? Because it's the best selling graphics card on Amazon, and it shouldn't be. Also on Newegg as well. There are graphics cards that are straight up faster than it, like for the same price. Y'all dummies who are buying the 3060 are completely avoiding the 4060. Like, why? Why? It's slow. It's slow for its price. And people are falling for it. 4,000 people a month, according to Amazon US, are falling for this graphics card. Now, I don't want to flame this graphics card too much, because I don't want to stray away from technically why it's a really bad graphics card, but I like to believe this graphics card was designed for crypto miners, because why would Nvidia release a 3060 with 12 gigabytes of VRAM in 2021 when their 3060 Ti and their 3070 and even their 3080 had 8, and 10 gigabytes of VRAM? Why would a much cheaper graphics card from Nvidia all of a sudden feature more VRAM? That sounds like actually a really good thing, but I think it was mostly designed for crypto miners, because that extra VRAM helps out, and being a lower SKU graphics card, I think means it had better crypto mining potential without consuming a ton of power. Now that's just what I think. That may not be the full story of the 3060, but this just came out at the wrong time with the wrong specs, and it's aged very poorly since then. But just because it's a 60 series graphics card, again, people think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread according to the Steam user crazy freaking benchmarks, whatever. This graphics card tilts me. Again, my English gets messed up because this graphics card is just, it shouldn't be selling as well as it is. Just because it's a 60 series graphics card doesn't mean it's that good anymore. So this is going an E tier above the A380. Please, like, for the love of whatever God you worship, this is way better for gaming than this. It doesn't even support frame generation. Anyways, 4060. So this is an interesting one. It is Nvidia's cheapest price point into the RTX 4000 lineup of graphics cards. It costs about $300 bang on. It never receives any discounts. It never does. Even during Black Friday and Cyber Monday, it never did, and it probably won't again this year. That said, one thing I do have to give this graphics card credit for is being the cheapest entry to DLSS 3.0 frame generation. If you are a fan of that and you want to utilize it, this is the cheapest graphics card that'll let you do it. But I don't think this is the graphics card for people who necessarily want to do ray tracing, because still, in terms of hardware, it's a bit lackluster. If you don't have frame generation on this graphics card, it looks not that impressive at all, especially in comparison to the other two graphics cards that are sitting right next to it in the same price range. So without any sort of DLSS frame generation magic, this card is very underwhelming. And it has an 8GB VRAM buffer with the same small 128-bit memory bus as a $200 RX 6600. That is unacceptable. So really, like, this is the graphics card I like to recommend for PC gamers who are gonna like no-life Fortnite, because Fortnite runs really well on Nvidia cards and exclusively supports DLSS. But if you aren't that kind of person, it's not the best graphics card to get, but it's not terrible at the same time. If this had 12GB of VRAM, I would be so much more comfortable recommending it because it'd make it way more future-proof, but it doesn't. And like I said, this thing, it's never gonna go on a discount. So between this and an RX 7600, I am gonna put it below it because unlike the RTX 4060, the RX 7600 every once in a while does go on a very severe price discount. I think recently it went for as low as $240, which would make it a very good deal. And I know during Black Friday and Cyber Monday and more or less during sales, it does go down in price, whereas this is gonna stay locked in at $300 and still sell like hotcakes. It's not as bad as the 3060 though, in my opinion. And like I alluded to earlier, you've got yourself the RX 6700 XT on deck for the same price as a 4060. If you eliminate frame generation and DLSS from the scenario between these two cards, the 6700 XT absolutely comes out on top, and it's still being sold brand new, although it's only being sold, like, I think on Amazon for $300 bang on. I think even in Newegg, it's kind of not really being sold anymore. So this graphics card is soon going out the door. I think finally, may or may not be a good thing, but this is like an RTX 3070 basically, but the color red, and it comes with more VRAM. Don't get me wrong, the 6700 XT is gonna go where it belongs. It's gonna go to the very, very top of A tier. It's come down in price to $300 on the dot. The hardware is too good. This probably has a better chance at running GTA 6 in 2027 than trying to hang on to an RTX 4060 that's gonna be limited to its 8GB VRAM buffer. Because remember, AMD FSR 3, that isn't just locked to a single generation of graphics cards. It's gonna be available on not just AMD, but also Intel and Nvidia graphics cards. So overall, it's an excellent graphics card, probably the best quote-unquote budget graphics card out of this entire video. But there's another graphics card that costs $60 more than the 6700 XT that's even more worth it, and we'll get to that soon. Now the 7600 XT, this one, this is a confusing graphics card to grade because on one hand, I like that it has 16GB of VRAM, but on the other hand, it still retains the small 128-bit memory bus that is pretty pathetic to see in a graphics card that costs about $320. And the only core improvements on the 6700 XT versus the 7600 is an increase in boost clock, and that's about it, I believe, and an increase in TDP. That said though, the benchmarks between this and a regular 7600 definitely show that the extra VRAM in this graphics card does help out, especially in the 1% lows. And if you come across any game that is limited to 8GB of VRAM in terms of full capacity and you need more just to extract more frame rate, this absolutely does take over a 7600 and even a 4060, but it's not fast enough to take over a 6700 XT that it was meant to replace. On average, I think this is slightly slower than a 6700. And once again, I feel like if you're dead set on getting a Radeon graphics card, the only thing RX 7000 offers over RX 6000 is the AP1 codec, better ray tracing performance, and slightly better efficiency. But I like to feel like Radeon gamers just care about pure frame rate and performance, and if that's you, the 6700 XT is a better buy than this. But this is still okay, and it's got 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so at least you're covered for the future, even if this is a slightly suboptimal graphics card. So I am gonna put this at the top of C tier. Okay, RX 6750 XT. This is really similar to the 6700 XT that I just covered, but the memory is faster on this. And in terms of pricing, it's mixed. I think between this and the 6700 XT, if you can get this for not much more than the 6700 XT, then absolutely pick this one up. But if it's say like $40 or $50 more expensive than a 6700 XT, then this is not worth it. That performance difference is not worth the jump in price. And even then, the graphics card right there we're gonna cover soon is gonna be like about $30 more than this if this doesn't cost more than a 6700 XT. And that is the one I'd choose for not that much more over this. But still, I gotta give this card credit because if you can't get this on a discount, it's very good. But given its uncertain price, I can't rank it too highly. So this is going to go in A tier below the ARC A580, because if you can get this for not that much more than a 6700 XT, absolutely get it. But if you can't, not worth it, but still a good graphics card. Oh yeah. And like I said, there's more graphics cards. I just couldn't fit them on the table. RX 6800. This is a good graphics card. Right now on Amazon US, you can get it on a discount for $360. And this, out of the entire video, I may have just said it for the 6700 XT, but I really mean it for this one. This probably offers the most hardware for the money. 16 gigabytes of VRAM, a very capable GPU, excellent performance, and I think this is the entry-level 1440p graphics card you should get. If you want to do 1440p gaming without any compromises for the cheapest cost, you cannot look any further down the line than the RX 6800. Those 4060s, 7600 XTs, and even 6700 XTs that I just covered can do 1440p, but if you want that extra blanket of protection and performance, this one. Also, did I mention it has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and it has a 256-bit memory bus. Not that small 128 that you find on the 7600 XT. No, this has the real deal. So what does the real deal give it? S tier. Straight up, our first S tier of the video, absolutely deservingly so. That said, I wonder how much longer this graphics card is gonna be produced. It might not be here for that much longer, but what a card, man. The RTX 4060 Ti 8GB. So this card costs more than the RX 6800 that we just covered. Comes with half the VRAM, half the memory bus. Fun fact, the RTX 3060 Ti in some games is actually faster than this. You wanna know why? Even though it has the same amount of VRAM, 8GB, it has a 256-bit memory bus. So yeah, that goes to show how important memory is in graphics cards nowadays. And that graphics card was last gen. This one is right now. It's overpriced as hell. 8GB of VRAM and a card that costs above $300 is actually a violation of the Geneva Convention. Look it up, it's a real thing. And the raw performance you get out of this graphics card is abysmal. I did a comparison between the 4060 Ti 8GB and the 6750 XT 12GB, and they were a draw. And at the time, both graphics cards costed about $400. But now in 2024, yes, this did go on a slight discount for about like $380 to $370. But now from Radeon, you can get the RX 6800 for less, and that card destroys the 6750 XT. So I'm gonna use the same term that I use for the 3050 for the 4060 Ti. It doesn't matter really if this has frame generation. You best hope that GTA 6 doesn't exceed the 8GB VRAM capacity of the 4060 Ti. Because even enabling frame generation uses VRAM on a graphics card. No amount of DLSS can save the 4060 Ti 8GB. It's unlike the 3060 though, this card doesn't really sell that well because at least consumers have woke up on this graphics card. So at least that's the only good thing, because Nvidia should never put out a mid-range graphics card like this ever again. I hope. Damn. It can still run games though. Yeah, I wouldn't go right there, because at least the 4060 Ti has frame generation. The 3060 doesn't. Okay, all right, this one. So this is the graphics card I was referring to when I said the RX 6800 was such a beast that it was meant to be replaced by this graphics card, but that never ended up happening because the 6800 still outperformed this. I did a video side-by-side comparison between this and a 6800. 6800 still won, and again, I feel like if you're thinking about getting a Radeon graphics card, you don't care a whole lot about ray tracing, you just care about pure performance, and if that's the case, the 6800 for 40 bucks less is a better buy, but that doesn't necessarily make the 7700 XT for about 400 bucks that bad of a buy either, because at least versus the 4060 Ti, this still runs over it. If this graphics card came down to about the same price of a 6800, then I'd recommend it. But right now, it isn't gonna get that hot of a recommendation from me, but it's not bad. It at least got a really nice price discount, because previously it was $450, which didn't make sense whatsoever. So this guy right here, I'm gonna put him, I wanna say at the top of B tier. Again, the 6800 is just that much better of a graphics card for $40 less, but for $400, this is a comfortable graphics card to get for PC gaming, not just now, but also into the future for 1440p gaming. Oh boy, and yeah, and I really do mean it. It really needed that price discount because now the 7800 XT can be had for below $500 comfortably. You can get these for about 480 USD. That's really good. That's really, really good. Oh, because you know what happened? I think AMD, they dropped this graphics card, the 7900 GRE, and then they saw everyone start buying this graphics card. And they're like, oh crap, are we cannibalizing the sales of our 7800 XT? I think we are. We need to get a discount on this card right now. And you can get it for below $500. I use this in my recent $1,200 gaming PC build guide. And the word I'm gonna use to describe this graphics card is bulletproof. Straight up bulletproof for 1440p gaming. You could even get it with 4K, honestly. In Fortnite, the stigma that AMD cards run bad on Fortnite was greatly disproven with the 7800 XT when I ran that game on performance mode, getting 250 frames per second and above at 1440p, as well as destroying every other game it came in contact with. There's a reason why a ton of people recommend this graphics card. It just offers one of the best blends between hardware, performance, and features, and I'd say the majority of the weight probably goes into the hardware, because this was one of the few graphics cards from RX 7000 that didn't look like an embarrassment at launch for MSRP versus the previous generation RX cards it was going up against. That's how good it is. Oh crap, this card was I skipped over the 4060 Ti 16GB. We'll get to that later, but let me put this where it rightfully belongs, at the top of S tier. This is more worth it over the 6800 in my opinion, even if it costs about $120 more. It is, like I said, just bulletproof. It's really flipping good for the price. The performance is unbeatable. That's really the main selling point. The performance is just abnormally good for below $500 for an RX 7000 card. And I can only imagine where this graphics card is gonna be like 2 years from now when it goes on even cheaper discounts, brand new hopefully. This might go down as, I mean, the 6700 XT is gonna go down as one of AMD's best graphics cards ever, I think. This might be the one from RX 7000 that leaves the best legacy from that lineup. Anyways, 1 second, we gotta go over here. Geforce RTX 4060 Ti 16GB. No. Kind of like the 7600 XT, like I was talking earlier, this RTX 4060 Ti may have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but it still has the same small 128-bit memory bus. That said, it does fix a lot of the issues of the 4060 Ti 8GB, because there's quite a few games where you're gonna need that extra VRAM to improve the 1% lows and make your overall gameplay feel smoother. So even though that issue was addressed with the 4060 Ti, at the end of the day, it's still a very slow graphics card. And this card can be had for about $450. And like I just glazed over recently, you can get the 7800 XT for only $30 more. That is the objectively, superiorly, if that's a word, better buy over the 4060 Ti 16GB. Either way, both graphics cards have the same amount of VRAM, but the 7800 XT has real VRAM in it with a 256-bit memory bus. This has the smaller one that's just That said, it's still objectively a better graphics card than the 4060 Ti 16GB, even if it costs about $75 more. So I'm gonna throw this in D tier. You know what? Okay, well, the Intel Arc at times can go on a really like good discount, so I think it's gonna stay above because I know how cheap the A770 can get, but Nvidia doesn't really like discounts, so if this is gonna stay at 450, it doesn't retain as much purchasing power in my opinion versus a really discounted A770. Oh yes. RX 7900 GRE. This one's also really good. And again, I feel like AMD cut the price of the 7800 XT in reaction to how good this graphics card was. Because at launch, this already justified its $550 price tag. But some nifty driver updates from AMD increased its memory speed and memory overclocking capabilities. And then this graphics card quickly became the objectively better buy over the 7800 XT. And then they're like, oh shoot, yeah, we gotta drop the price of the 7800 XT right now. But as of making this video, this is at MSRP $550. It can go down to about $520 to $30 at the lowest. No, sorry, $530, which is very good. But that 7800 XT I think is too good to ignore for about 50 bucks less. This is still objectively a very excellent graphics card for all the same reasons of the 7800 XT. This is very similar to a 7900 XT, just a little bit cut down, but the hardware is still there to make this a very great all-around graphics card. And really, I think this might be like the best entry-level 4K gaming graphics card this generation because the 7800 XT destroys 1440p. So with the 7900 GRE being just that much better, for about $50 more, I think you can do some budget 4K gaming with the 7900 GRE. Oh man, if I could show you guys right now, there's just a sea of boxes right here, and we still got more to cover in the tier list. RTX 4070. I don't know why Nvidia hasn't given this like the price discount that it really needs, because it's getting slaughtered by the 7900 GRE for the same price. This really should be selling for $500 straight up. It needs a $50 discount. And the cheapest I ever recall it selling for during Black Friday was about $530. So it still needs to go lower. And in terms of raw performance, it gets beat by the competition. But one thing I will give the 4070 a bit of credit for is that unlike the 4060 Ti 8 and 16 gigabyte cards, which just straight up featured a slow GPU core, the 4070 isn't that bad. And the price also isn't terrible. So this is probably the first RTX 4000 card from Nvidia that didn't look ridiculously overpriced at launch, versus say the 4070 Ti, say versus the 4080 and especially the 4090. Well, the 4090, that technically doesn't count because that was for MSRP when it first launched and it actually had all the beans in the hardware that actually kind of justified its ridiculous price tag. But the 4070 was the next card that didn't look as much of an embarrassment. And for the time that it released, it was actually okay. And where does okay put you? I think okay is gonna put you, I'm gonna say below the 6600 XT, because again, the 4070 just needs to go on a price discount. It really needs to. And also like, why even bother the 4070 when you can get the 4070 Super for only $50 more, or $40 if the 4070 Super is on a discount, which surprisingly, it happens to be more often than not. Now, finally, this is one of the first Nvidia graphics cards I'm truly fine in recommending because the original 4070, I felt it had the features, it had the hardware to a degree for its price, but it lacked a bit of raw performance, and the 4070 Super addressed that. This graphics card, in terms of raw performance, beats the 7800 XT, although it doesn't beat the 7900 GRE. But still, for $600, it's a very well-rounded graphics card, and I think this is the cheapest price point you can get into for an Nvidia graphics card if you want to do any sort of premier ray tracing with an RTX card. All the cards I covered up until this point, with the exception of the 4070, were just too slow in my opinion. You'd be limited to like 1080p for ray tracing, but this can comfortably do ray tracing at 1440p, especially when you throw in frame generation into the mix. And a lot of you guys have bought the 4070 Super and have reported very good things about it. So I'm really glad that Nvidia looked at the original 4070. They said we can do better and will not charge that much more for it. And as a matter of fact, we'll charge the same amount for it, 600 bucks. So props to Nvidia for making a very well-rounded graphics card that isn't overpriced, that comes with good hardware for the price, and performance, which for the time that it launched, did beat AMD in terms of raw performance. So I'm gonna throw this graphics card right here smack dab in the middle of A tier. Because again, being an Nvidia graphics card, I wish it'd go on discount more because that'd make it even more valuable versus the other two right here, which I know will. Whereas the 6700 XT is just a little bit of an anomaly because the hardware for the price is just too good to pass up. But I think right there is pretty appropriate. A tier is still an excellent rating for a graphics card. And I'd say if you put more of your emphasis on ray tracing, it could be an S tier graphics card. But just about the only thing holding it back is its 12GB VRAM buffer. That's the only con with the 4070 Super, because the other two giants right here that ranked above it, they come with 16, which is a bit more recommended for a $500 to $600 graphics card. Okay, we're on the home stretch. I have the final stack of GPU boxes to cover this last segment of the video. And without further ado, RX 7900 XT. This also, so weirdly enough, from AMD and Nvidia, their graphics cards get like way better the more you spend. And I know that sounds obvious, like, well, duh, the more you spend on a graphics card, the faster it's gonna be. But in terms of the hardware that you're getting for the price, it objectively gets significantly better the more you spend. Just for some reason, over the past 2 generations, with the exception of RX 6000, AMD and Nvidia kind of really let the ball go on their budget graphics cards, but they put everything in for their higher end graphics cards, which is why we end up with a graphics card like the 7900 XT with 20GB of VRAM. When this launched, it wasn't that well received because it was more or less a pricing tactic to get people to buy the 7900 XTX for only $100 more, which made this graphics card very undesirable at launch. But now it's gotten quite a few price discounts because AMD finally got smart in the head with where they should have priced this graphics card at launch, and is now selling for $700. Now, something I'm gonna use with a lot of these AMD graphics cards in this upper price range is that you're really paying for the hardware. That's gonna be the main selling point of these graphics cards going forward, because one thing I will place a bit more weight on as we get more expensive with these graphics cards is how well the ray tracing performance is, because I like to think if you're gonna spend over $700 on a graphics card, there at least be some aspect of ray tracing that is respectable on these graphics cards, which these RX 7000 cards, being so fast in the first place, can indeed do, but it's just way better on an Nvidia graphics card in this price range. Anyways, 7900 XT, only get this if you're gonna do 4K gaming. It's way too fast for 1440p. It is a waste of money for 1440p gaming. And this one's a bit tricky to rank because I'm gonna put this in B tier, all right? I do think it is a very good graphics card for the price, but it does cost $700. That's kind of expensive compared to the absolute bargains you're getting right here in S tier. But it's no slouch either for a graphics card. It's really flipping fast. Now, contractually, I have to include this graphics card, and that being the 4070 Ti, because you still can technically get this brand new on Amazon in Newegg, but it's not good, nope, not in this price category, because it has 12GB of VRAM, which would have been fine if this graphics card costed, say, $500, but it doesn't. It costs about $750 to $720. No good. And versus the 7900 XT that I just covered, this comes with 8GB more of VRAM. And that does make a difference in this upper price category because you're gonna be playing at higher resolutions. That's gonna take up larger memory sizes in your VRAM. Memory textures are gonna be bigger. You want a graphics card with more VRAM in this upper price category. And that was the main issue with the 4070 Ti. The actual GPU core of the 4070 Ti was actually fairly fast. But if you ran into any VRAM limited scenarios, this thing absolutely ran over it. So although the 4070 Ti by definition you can still get in 2024, it's not worth getting because you have the super model for only $50 more. This was replaced for a reason. So I'm gonna throw this in D tier between the A770 and the 4060 Ti 16GB. Now I think the most underrated graphics card from Nvidia this generation, the 4070 Ti Super. At launch, I said this a ton of times if you watch my GPUs of the week videos, but at launch, this graphics card wasn't received the most positively because in terms of raw performance, it still lost to, you know, this beast of a graphics card right here, but not by much. It really didn't lose it by a whole lot. And in turn, you gained 4 extra gigabytes of VRAM, which was a much welcomed addition to the 4070 Ti. And like I said, for the original 4070 Ti, the actual GPU core of it was pretty fast. If you were gaming in anything that wasn't VRAM limited, it could keep up with a 7900 XT. So the main issue that the 4070 Super addressed with the original 4070 Ti was adding more VRAM. And now for about $800, although it's about $100 more than the 7900 XT, I think it's a little bit more well-rounded. Because yeah, sure, it's slightly slower in terms of raw performance, but the ray tracing on this card is superb. And fortunately, there aren't any huge price markups for the 4070 Ti Super, whereas some of the other graphics cards from Nvidia we'll cover later in this video still do have some price markups even this late into their generation. And this is a 4K gaming workhorse. And again, being a 40 series card, it's also going to be quite efficient, especially compared to some of these really higher end, higher powered Radeon cards that'll consume a lot more wattage. So it's an overall nice card, I think. So being slightly more well-rounded for me is going to put this at the very top of B tier, I want to say. Could go into A tier. If this were on a comfortable discount, if Nvidia cards just at all went on a discount, they would automatically move up like a tier. But because I know they probably won't, they're gonna stay where they are, unfortunately. Oh no. Oh, there's so many boxes here. I forgot one. Radeon RX 7900 XTX. This is the top of the line graphics card you can get from AMD right now. And like I said, for the 7900 XT, this is going to offer a ton of hardware and raw performance for the price. And this card has been steadily coming down in price. Something funny I want to say, you know, like the meme, like every 60 seconds in Africa passes, you know, there's a hungry village or something like that. I like to think every 60 seconds that passes, the RX 7900 XTX creeps down in price even more. This is soon gonna go below $900 on the regular. And when that happens, it's going to be a crazy sight to see. Because I'm gonna let it be known, like in terms of raw performance, if you eliminate ray tracing and DLSS from the mix, it can go toe to toe with the 4090 in a few games for like almost half the price, which is very impressive. So once again, if you cared about pure frame rate, performance with the lowest frame times, you can't get any better than this. Once again, 24 gigabytes of VRAM. This thing is definitely gonna be able to run GTA 6 at 4K when it comes out in 2027 on PC. There's not much more I really gotta say, but I'm gonna place this probably in between the A580 and the 4070 Super. Reason being, it's not higher up in A tier because being a Radeon card that's this expensive, although its raw performance is so good that ray tracing on this graphics card is actually still pretty good. Nvidia is just that much better for the same price. And once again, I like to think if you're spending almost $1,000 on a graphics card, you want something that can probably do ray tracing extremely well. That doesn't take anything off this graphics card though. It is incredible for the price. Oh, and speaking of price, that was the one issue that the original 4080 had that the 4080 Super addressed. The 4080 Super came out earlier this year for a price of $1,000, and I think that was a good move from Nvidia, as with most of these Super Series cards, because the 4070 Super needed more performance. They addressed that. The 4070 Ti Super needed more VRAM. They addressed that. And the 4080 Super just needed to be cheaper, and they addressed that. So for about $1,000 right now, or actually right now, it's below $1,000 depending on where you look. This is also a really excellent graphics card. 16 gigabytes of VRAM is still nothing to complain about. Yes, it's not as impressive as 24 from the 7900 XTX for less, but still for 4K gaming, I think that'll be supple from now until when GTA 6 launches. And the ray tracing on this graphics card is outstanding. So if you wanted to do that, honestly, don't even look at a 4090 because the 4090 is just ridiculously more expensive than this. I don't think you're gonna get like an additional $700 worth of ray tracing performance with a 4090 over a 4080 Super. This is, for a high-end card from Nvidia, not bad at all. So I'm probably gonna put this in B tier. I wanna say probably right there, above the 7700 XT, because the hardware is pretty decent for an Nvidia card for the price, but not as good, I think, as a 7900 XT or a 4070 Ti Super in terms of purchasing power. Again, both these graphics cards have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so that puts them on fairly equal playing. And every now and then, the 4080 Super isn't $1,000 on the dot. It's more than that. And again, I don't think this 4080 Super is going to experience any price discounts anytime soon. Oh my, we're running out of room here. So why am I even including the 4080 in this list when it's actually going to cost more than a 4080 Super? That is because on Amazon and Newegg, you can still pick these up for more than a 4080 Super, and they're going to be objectively the same in terms of performance. But this, again, is just kind of a PSA. You want to get the 4080 Super over the 4080 because you can find 4080s right now for about like $1,300, which is not worth it. There's a reason why the 4080 Super replaced this in the first place, because it offers that really good price discount, and with that premium and price, just don't get it. Get a 4080 Super. It has the exact same capabilities. Is it any? Yeah, that's just how bad the 4060 Ti is. And even a heavily marked up 4080 is more worth it than a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Which leaves us with the final kahuna of a graphics card. Can this fit in frame? Yes, it can. The RTX 4090. When this graphics card launched, it actually kind of justified its $1,600 price tag because it was that much faster over last generation. One thing you'll notice with a lot of RTX 4000 and I think even RTX 3000 cards is that the hardware you get for the money gets objectively worse as you go down in the price categories. But they give the full beans for the 90 series cards every time, and that does kind of justify their extremely expensive price tag. However, this time around for RTX 4000, the 4090 at $1,600 was still expensive at launch, only really worth it for enthusiasts who do the highest end 4K or ultra wide gaming there is. But there was a brief period of time where, or not a brief period, it's still ongoing right now, but this card did get some price increases due to demand, due to AI. So for a while, this graphics card couldn't be had for even below $2,000, and now shooting this in July of 2024, it's retailing for about $1,700, which is only $100 over MSRP, but it's not gonna get that good of marks for me because the 5090 is coming. It's going to be another new generation of graphics cards from Nvidia that are going to get the full beans, the full hardware, and versus their previous flagship, it's just going to be worth it. If it's gonna cost $2,000, it's gonna be more worth it than a $1,600 RTX 4090. But still speaking, this is the fastest graphics card there is, period. You can't really beat that, but it's so expensive. Oh yeah, and it's also the one RTX 4000 card that does consume a lot of power, whereas the rest of the RTX 4000 cards are for the most part efficient. So there is that as well, but who cares? Because this is the fastest graphics card. It needs all the juice it can get. So I'm gonna throw this in C tier just below the 4060, because I gotta give it credit. It's the fastest thing there is, but it's really damn expensive. All right. Get your stretch on, stand up, because we have made it to the end of the video. Here's the final ranking. I think I'm pretty pleased with this. Those Super Series cards are by far the best options from Nvidia right now. They were much needed revisions from the RTX 4000 lineup, but their lower series cards, they need more oomph. They need more hardware for the money, whereas that's something that isn't lacking from AMD in that price range. As you can see, a lot of their mid-range to consumer end cards are very good, but just about anything under $200 other than an A580 is gonna be trash for the most part. But yeah, that is the tier list, and if you've enjoyed this video up until the point and you've made it to this part of the video and you've been locked in up until this point, might as well give it a like. That'd be greatly appreciated. And if you enjoy tier list videos, be sure to subscribe to the Scatterable channel because I probably will produce more. Oh yeah. So with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and this is the Scatterable channel, signing out.